Okay, so this time we've got someone with a disability who is in a wheelchair, okay? And specifically in this course, we're not looking at the general public, we're looking at athletes, okay? So someone who is in the Paralympics 100-meter wheelchair race. What are the biomechanical principles that we can use and apply to make that athlete do better, okay? So first of all, same principles for movement. We've got applied force and we've got reactive force, all right? Except there are two applications happening here instead of the squatter. So not only is the wheelchair in contact with the ground, so there is applied force going to the ground and the ground is providing force back, but there is also applied force from the wheelchair, from the hands of the athlete onto the wheelchair's wheels, all right? So we are applying force here. It is then transferring force to the ground, and then the ground provides it back, etc. All right? So there's a couple of things going on there with the principles of movement. We get a bit more detail though when we hit into injury prevention and efficiency. So first of all, injury prevention. I've got momentum here. Why is that important for injury prevention in a wheelchair athlete? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because wheelchairs themselves can be made from different materials. A fully steel wheelchair may weigh upwards of 20 kilos, but a carbon fiber wheelchair may only weigh 3 or 4 kilos, okay? If something is lighter, its mass is less, but you are able to apply the same amount of force to it, that will increase your velocity and therefore increase your momentum. And if the wheelchair athlete has to do less work in their shoulders to make the wheelchair go as fast as it can, that is going to lower injury prevention in the shoulders, all right? So, and just think about it logically. If you have to lift something really, really heavy as opposed to lifting something light, all right, which one's going to cause more injury? The heavy thing, okay? We've also got our basic principles here of balance and stability. So obviously when the wheelchair athlete is seated in the wheelchair itself needs to be designed or co-designed with the athlete in mind so that their center of gravity is straight down from their hips, okay? If you were sitting in a wheelchair, but your center of gravity was out here because of the angle of the seat or some other variable, then the wheelchair's athlete is probably more likely to topple forwards. Same again, all right, and especially if we're trying to travel forward as fast as we can, if our center of gravity sitting in the wheelchair is actually back here because let's say the back of the wheelchair was really heavy compared to the front of the wheelchair, and your center of gravity pulls out the back here, then you're probably more likely to do these ones and fall backwards. So balance and stability, with your cog, log, and your boss, it's very, very important on designing of the wheelchair with the athlete in mind. We've got the principle of linear motion for injury prevention because as the athlete is pushing like this, we want most parts going forward, all right? And that's going to reduce the strain and the shearing forces on the shoulder and the elbows and the wrist, okay? So imagine instead of pushing like this at nice right angles with my arms, if I had to push like this or something, I don't know, if wheelchairs were designed differently, just get creative for a minute, all right? That's going to create a lot more stress and a lot more different types of motion in the body, which is more likely to lead to injury. And then finally, we've got angular motion. So this time, as opposed to the squat, we have a major component of angular motion in the wheelchair athlete because the wheels are turning around an axis, okay? So remember, anytime there's something pivoted and something turns around it, that is angular motion, all right? So injury prevention with the angular motion means that as the wheel turns around, as we're pushing on it, we want that to be as easy as possible, all right? So imagine if you had a wheelchair that had really tight fixings, or maybe it hadn't been lubricated in a while, and you're trying to push the wheel, then it's really, really hard. Once again, you're going to put more forces through your arms to produce the same amount of work, and therefore more likely to get injured. And we don't want that. So that's injury prevention. Our last one is looking at efficiency. So this time with our wheelchair athlete, as I explained here with the whole concept of the wheelchair itself, we want to try and improve momentum by reducing the weight of the wheelchair as much as possible, all right? Because that will lead to greater acceleration, velocity, etc. And therefore, the wheelchair athlete has to work less to produce maximum speed, and therefore they do better in their race. Okay. We've already spoke about linear motion. Obviously, the wheelchair athlete wants to travel straight as best as they can, not much up and down motion. Angular motion. All right. So this is important when you think about the wheels, okay, themselves. So with the wheels in a wheelchair, if you have something with small wheels, all right. So imagine, once again, get creative in your head. All right. If you had a wheelchair that was suitable for me, but the wheels were like, as big as my fist, and they were just like right on the ground, okay? How many times would I have to push those little tiny wheels to go forward? A lot. I'd be pushing all day like this on my tiny wheels to move. And that would suck, all right? A bigger wheel means like one push can move you like 2 meters as opposed to one push moving you 5 centimeters, all right? But that's like, to a point, bigger is going to be better, all right? But then you are going to get to this point of diminishing returns where all of a sudden, if you've got like gigantic wheels and you can't push them anymore, well, that's not going to be efficient either, because all of a sudden, instead of using nice, smooth motions, you've got to use these big circular, like circumduction type stuff with your shoulders, and you're not moving at all. And that's very, very tiring, all right? So the wheels basically have to be the right size for the athlete to produce the most efficiency, okay? So you can start to think about this, right? If the wheelchair itself has to be made out of a certain material for the best performance, if it has to be tailored to the athlete's center of gravity, line of gravity for the best stability and performance, and now the wheels size themselves have to be tailored perfectly for the athlete's height, like from the ground when they're sitting in a wheelchair, there is a lot of like minutia that goes into the design of a sports athlete's wheelchair. You can't just like walk in a Rebel and pick up a sports athlete's wheelchair and it's going to be one size fits all, okay? Every little thing, according to biomechanics, has to be tailored specific for the individual, all right? It's quite crazy, very interesting. I think so.
So it's Amy Fisher into Ange Ballard in 3, Rosemary Little 4, Sarah Jane, Javina Clifton Blind 5, and Natasha Price. It's a good push there from Amy Fisher at the start, but here comes Ange Ballard from the ACT, powering towards the finish line. This is some great pushing there, backing up again from last night. She's going to take the line first place. Then it's Amy Fisher from New South Wales, going back to Natasha Price in lane 6. Sarah Jane, Javina Clifton Blind crosses the line next, and this will be Rosemary Little. Team 33 athlete, she will be next to cross the line.
Anyway, and then our last ones, and these ones didn't apply to squatting either. So this is why I chose this example, because it was quite different. So not only have we got like movement this time as opposed to a squat, but now we've got to consider things like drag, okay? So remember drag forces in fluid mechanics? The drag is basically the thing that slows you down, all right? There's two types of drags. We've got profile drag and surface drag. So profile drag is the drag you experience from the shape of your front that hits the wind. And surface drag is the drag that is created from the surface or the coating that goes over you, all right? So we think about a wheelchair design, we want something that's like going to be nice and aerodynamic. It's not going to catch a lot of wind. Like we don't want a sports wheelchair that has a parachute at the back, all right? Because that's going to create a heck of a lot of profile drag and slow you right down, all right? You probably want it to be like sleek and refined, skinny as possible, maybe like some, 45-degree angles to act as like wind barriers for wind to like ricochet off it as opposed to just belting onto it. So you can think about how you could design maybe like the leg position needs to be angled in a certain way too. I'll see if I can find a picture of like a really sick wheelchair and like be like, yeah, that's amazing. And then surface drag. So obviously the athlete themselves and the wheelchair, you don't want like little bits and bobs, like little nuts and bolts and little flary things. And like those little things you used to stick in the side of your handlebars as a kid and you used to ride your bike around. You don't want them on the wheelchair because that's going to create a lot more surface drag. Every little thing counts in sports, right? And then the athlete himself, they're probably, you know, they're coming to my wardrobe and they're getting like a full Lycra outfit, you know, with like, it's probably like a bodysuit at this point with like some cool helmet that's got like some pointy bit out the back like the cyclists do in the velodrome. You can start to think about how all of these things are going to play together. And like by wearing like the full Lycra outfit with the sick helmet, they might reduce their 100-meter time by 0.01 seconds. And you're like, 0.01 seconds? What's the point? When you're like the best in the world and you are competing for that gold medal to be number one, like you're not just number one at your local town, you are number one in the world. 0.01 is a lot, and you will do anything you can to take 0.01 off your time, all right? So we're like wearing the funky outfit for 0.01. We're getting the right shape wheelchair for another 0.03, okay? We're making sure the wheel size is correct for the athlete for another 0.03. And like all these things start to add up, right, to make top athletes the top athletes. And that is why biomechanical principles applied is such a massive part of sports development, with equipment development, with researching, with looking at techniques, examination. Yeah, it's a massive, massive field. And it's all very interesting, and I am very passionate about it. And hopefully you are too now. Never know. Some of you may end up being biomechanical scientists when you leave school. Anyway, that's the video on biomechanical principles applied. Thanks.